You're listening to Paris Undressed on Paris Underground Radio.
Welcome to Paris Undressed. I'm Kate Kemp-Griffin, your host and the author of Paris Undressed, The Secrets of French Lingerie. Every week, we go behind the scenes of the lingerie capital of the world to explore femininity and sensuality. And if you listen carefully, tuning into both the conversation and the whispers of your body, you'll find joy, beauty, and delight. My guest today is Kaaren Harper, founder and creative director of Layneau, a bespoke lingerie brand offering glamorous and delicate, yet slightly dramatic, one-of-a-kind pieces made with the finest fabrics and laces. Weaving together the artistry and complexity of European craftsmanship, Layneau has earned a reputation for creating modern designs from timeless traditions. Kaaren joins me from her atelier in Portland, Oregon, to talk about her dedication to dressing women in pieces that inspire and engage the senses. Kaaren, welcome, and thank you for joining me today.
Thank you so much. This is delightful. When you reached out to me, it was kind of a surprise, but then our first conversation to prepare for this, it was like, oh, I've known this woman all of my life. I can't wait to continue the conversation.
Yes, for our listeners, Kaaren and I have been sort of following each other on social media, one of those sort of wonderful advantages of social media. And yes, just reached out and then just thought we should probably perhaps introduce ourselves before we did this. And then we almost kind of forgot we didn't know each other right away. And so, and here we are. Here we are.
Yeah.
So perhaps share with our listeners just a little bit about where you grew up and what were your interests.
So I grew up in the Pacific Northwest on a hobby farm being, enough trouble to keep you home and not enough to do it for a living. It was a very rural area. It was very idyllic in many ways. It was lovely. Grew up riding horses, cleaning chicken coops, all that sort of stuff. My mother was a retired mad woman. She had been an executive in the advertising industry before that was common. And my father was, I guess, the kind way of putting it, a bit of an adventurer. He'd been, yes, a wild young man. And so they thought the best place to raise us was this sort of almost middle of nowhere little farm. And I had bigger dreams. I just had this great aunt who lived in Portland, Oregon. And so we would trek over there and eat hot dogs off Rosenthal china with Reed and Barton silver and drink, iced tea out of crystal glasses. And I just thought that was the way life was supposed to be. And fast forward, I was a bit precocious and went to college. I went to university at 16 and I needed to work. I needed a job and I'd grown up sewing. My mother believed that idle hands were to be put to work. And so we learned to sew. I learned to sew. We did embroidery and quilting and crocheting and knitting and spinning and all that sort of country stuff. And I'd made my clothes from a very early age. And so I walked into the costume shop. I went up to the head designer who ran this thing and I said, I can sew, you should hire me. At which point he was sort of like, well, you're sort of a bit much. And I ended up working for him and he was a delight. Victor Leverett, he'd worked with Nancy Potts on hair. So he was a Tony Award winning designer and he was just one of the most amazing people. I just absolutely adored him. God rest his soul. So and that sort of put me on a track of finding my people, the glamour life, always called.
And the sewing, did you find it tedious or did you find it a source of creativity?
Creativity. When I was young, I had greater patience than I do now. Mm-hmm. I love to noodle things out. I love to figure out how. It made my mother crazy because she was an absolute linear person and she was very much a perfectionist and she followed the pattern exactly. And the seam ripper was your best friend because it had to be straight. It had to be perfect. And I was a little more free form. I love perfectionism. In fact, my brand is about perfectionism, but I wasn't into the pattern thing. I just I could see it in my head and I could figure out how to do it. And so I just went with that. And I was able, when I was sewing a lot myself, Well, I mean, the perfect example, I still haven't changed. 3.5 years ago, I got married to my husband. And of course, I have this beautiful atelier and this very, very skilled premier who's like, tell me what you want, tell me what you want, tell me what you want. I have a manufacturing company that I work with for volume stuff. And she's like, tell me what you want, tell me what you want for your dress, I'll make it for you. And I'm like, I just couldn't figure it out yet. And I was over at a fabric jobber and I walked through and I finally found the fabric and I, drew up this dress and they didn't have time to make it because, I'm like, it's 4 days cut and sew, right? And so I end up doing it myself the week of the wedding.
As well as planning the wedding, you're making your wedding dress.
Oh, yeah, of course. And it's, I'm of a certain age. And so it's not a big white poofy dress. We got married at my husband's ranch up on the east side. And so it wasn't a traditional wedding dress. In fact, it was very much inspired by Uliana Sergenko. I don't know if you know the Russian designer, but it had sort of that flavor. But yeah, I mean, the morning of the wedding, that we need to run up to the ranch, I'm, fixing everything. But so some things haven't changed. But I can still do it because I don't do very much sewing of my own anymore. I leave it to those more skilled and more patient.
Yes, but you can leave it to others when you actually know what you're asking for as well. And when you can see how it's made and then know enough about the technique to put it together that when it's not done when it's not done the right way.
Exactly. And, my great aunt, my savior in my young life, as far as, Miss Rosenthal China, she had no children. She lived this beautiful lifestyle with her husband that was very, very savory, very beautiful, very aesthetic. Mm-hmm. And so it seduced me. And she had this gorgeous wedding trousseau that had been made by the finest shop in town, it had been imported from Paris, and it was the beautiful lace work. And it was, this gorgeous Art Deco thing. And I have it packed away still in acid-free tissue and, the archive, because it was this seminal moment of, this is how you savor life, and you savor it from the inside out. Mm-hmm. And we layer ourselves with this luxury. And I don't mean that in a snobby logomania sort of way. I mean that in appreciation for craft, appreciation for the fruit of human labor, I think is such a precious, dignified, appropriate thing.
We're going to talk a little bit about the trousseau and your great aunt, because it's linked to the inspiration of your brand. But before we get there, can you tell us a little bit about young Kaaren and your relationship with your body growing up and your first bra?
Oh God, that was a disaster. So my mother was very practical, and I bloomed early. I was very tall. I'm 5'7", so I'm not particularly tall in the end. But when I was in 3rd and 4th grade, I grew up and I bloomed. I had little bosoms rather early. And I remember we went to Sears and this horrible, quote unquote training bra moment. And it was just this, I'm sitting here almost like going into a sweat thinking about how awful it was. I'm here in the middle of a sales floor with my mother, and she's holding this thing up and I'm completely horrified. And on top of it, it was this ugly, pragmatic, white, stretchy thing. Yeah. And it might as, quite honestly, I think back of it now that you're asking me, it's like, it looked like the same fabric as a jock strap. And I just thought that was kind of vulgar and unpleasant. And so it was really this, I felt a profound disconnect. Mm. I knew that there was something else out there, but I couldn't access it. And so that was very frustrating. And that really drove me, because it was awkward being the tall girl. It was awkward having this development earlier than all of my peers. I remember being on the playground and having boys try to snap my bra strap.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that would happen now. I don't think, I think we channel children's energies differently and we approach that differently, but this was the 70s. And so, yeah, bra strap snapping was a rite of passage. But I suppose the good news is out of that, trauma would be that I learned to be very assertive, and boys would do that. And because I was bigger, taller, and stronger, I would whack them.
Out of my way.
It's like, try that again.
That's right.
And you'll be on the ground. Yeah.
I'm disposing of you.
Yes. In the end, I think in the end, it served me well.
Well, I speak to a lot of women about first bra experiences, and I was like you. I'm sort of 5'7" now, which wasn't such a great thing at sort of 10 years old. And the options, and sounds like you had a mom that took you at least to the store, and so did I, but the resources available were those Sears bras. So what else was there? And it was very, and whether you bloomed early or you bloomed late, there doesn't seem to be a happy middle ground of where everything kind of just synced for any of us. And it's just an interesting moment in our lives where this is sort of presented to us. And you mentioned the word training bra, which is the language that we had. And that word itself, it doesn't amuse me anymore, but it's like training for what?
Exactly.
Training for what?
The breasts will do what the breasts will do no matter what. They are untrainable.
It's like already we're not doing it right. Like we need to train it. Like there's something in the training. We're not quite there yet. And the pulling of the bra straps, things change, but you sort of either, when that happened to me, I remember laughing as a means of defense. It wasn't. And then certainly with breasts comes period. So you've got two ends of the body to start dealing with that sort of comes along with the whole thing. But it's interesting just, back then you didn't know that you were going to be a lingerie designer in the end, but you are becoming the young woman that you are. Kaaren, what are 3 words that best describe your personality?
Oh God. Quirky. Mm-hmm. Quirky, smart, and driven.
Interesting. Yeah. I love that quirky first came to mind too. That's not necessarily one that one would, put in the forefront. It might be one that you sort of keep for your best friend or keep for you. But it's lovely that we can sort of now talk about personality traits that are more than just safe answers, and to say that you're smart, that wasn't something we said in the 70s.
No. Oh God, no.
Or even perhaps now, it's still not something you put out there right away. It's okay to be smart, but just don't show it too much.
Yes. Yeah. It's intelligence was always a source of pride in my family, and a good education was always a source of pride. So I was very blessed to grow up being able to embrace that and to be proud of it. And to not fear intelligence and not suffer fools either is the other side of that. My family is my sister and I used to have misquoting Shakespeare contests.
As one does. If you're enjoying this episode of Paris Undressed, you may also be interested in The Heart of You, hosted by spiritual guidance coach and tarot reader Annette Dalou, who explores the vast wonder of spiritual growth through intuition, divination, and unconditional love. Tune into this magical podcast. Paris Undressed will be right back after a word from our sponsors. And now, back to Paris Undressed. You founded Layneau in 2012, and you say that in many ways it was a lifetime in the making. Can you tell us a bit more about what inspired you to start a lingerie brand?
Going back to that training bra, that early bosom catcher, even, it just sort of percolated. I suppose it's the drive for an erotic life. And when I say the word erotic, I don't mean sex. I mean having all of your senses engaged in your life and savoring all of it. I think that the impetus behind Layneau was a bit of a tragedy in my romantic life. I was married to someone that I adored. We had a very loving but fraught relationship. It came to an end, one of those sad moments where you just go, we can't keep doing this. There's no more love to pour on it. It's not working. And it was the most heart-wrenching thing I've ever done in my life was to end that relationship. And it made me drill down to my core being and have to build it back up. And quite honestly, the idea of being naked with another partner horrified me. It horrified me. And, I was 47 at the time, and the idea of being naked with another man just made me nauseous. And so I went out shopping and decided to find something to armor myself, to steel me. Good packaging goes a long way, if you will. And I didn't find anything that really spoke to me the way I wanted it to. There was a beautiful shop in downtown Portland called Jane's Vanity. She's gone online now. She and I knew her for a very long time. I used to have a jewelry store up the street from her. And I went in there and there was some beautiful, she always has gorgeous things. And there was some beautiful, tidy little, frilly things from France and beautifully made, but not built for the Nordic blend body of mine. And so I went back to my great aunt's trousseau and I started digging through and my collection of vintage clothing that I've had my whole life and started going, but this is made for me. It's too fragile to wear. But maybe there's something here. When I was in my 20s and my girlfriends were getting married, I would make them, I had this beautiful cache of parachute silk. And so I would hand sew these beautiful corset covers and little teddies and things with silk buttonhole thread and in bright colors and then this parachute silk and give that as a bridal gift. And so I started thinking about that. So it's been a vernacular, it's been a language that's been rolling around in me this whole time. And so now confronted with my own sexuality in a new way, I went, well, if I can't find something, I must not be alone in that. And so I started making stuff, and a friend of mine encouraged me to go forth and build it. And it took me almost 2 years really to connect with my premiere. Beautiful woman.
So I don't know the word premiere. When you use the word premiere, how does
Mon premiere, l'appétiment.
Oh, okay.
So the premiere in any atelier is the head seamstress.
Okay.
She's the mistress,
right,
of the atelier. And so she is my number one seamstress. And she has 30 years of experience, European education. I need to send you something because until you experience Layneau firsthand, this is all theory. Her hands are blessed. They are truly blessed. When we do bias binding, it is hand turned. She stitches it by hand. It's 33 inches stitches to the inch. It's absolutely invisible. The best couture houses working today match us, but don't exceed us. You have to go back to Alexander McQueen when McQueen was still there. You have to go back to technique in the original Dior ateliers. What we do is precious and small. We're not a big, massive company. There's Elena, my premiere. There's a small factory up in Bellevue, Washington that, when I do the bed jackets, I do a lot of them at once. And so they do those. And she's a 4th generation tailor out of Bulgaria. So, it's fine women's work, if you will.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And that was the other important thing in founding the company, was to try to perpetuate knowledge and to maintain this skill set, because it's leaving us rapidly. I know this is, we've kind of gone far afield from the question, but it is important that we maintain the skills. I mean, the métier, tradition in France, I think is phenomenal.
Oh, there's an enormous respect for it still, but it's fading. It's fading quickly, and the knowledge of the how-to. But when you see the difference and when you feel the difference, you understand it right away. But if you don't have anything to compare it to, then it's a little bit like, well, you don't know what you're missing. But the stitching and the turning over of the hems and the detail of all of that, your collection is handmade. The lace, and we'll talk about this later too, a bit further on, is hand applied. And the craftsmanship is behind all of that. But what you see is just an extraordinarily beautiful piece of lingerie. And I kind of want to give, I don't want to give it a type, but there's a very old glamour elegance to it. And there's a lot of cutting on the bias, which flows with the body as opposed to confining the body. But when you talked about why you founded Layneau and then the work that goes into it, you've already actually answered a few questions. It's sort of like the process of designing and the difficulty of designing a lingerie collection. And what have you found to be the hardest from taking an image in your head and a design on paper and then turning it into a reality? What has sort of surprised you, even though you have the capacity and knowledge of being a seamstress?
It's design is always problem solving. And I think that is the compelling piece of it. To me, it's at its best, it is this coaxing of material into the dream. You surprise yourself. I started working with Elena, and she told me, the first one of the test pieces, it was like, well, I can't do that with that fabric. It's like, yes, you can. Yes, you can. We have to be clever about it, and, we have to work it. In the interim of my life, between working as a costume designer and starting Layneau, I had two other lives. One as a corporate girl in the fashion industry with Nordstrom's. And then that led me into doing some consulting. And then I ended up owning a fine jewelry store where we did antique and estate jewelry and also custom pieces. And we were known for our exceptionally fine work. And handling those pieces, 200, 300-year-old pieces of jewelry, you learn something. And having really skilled artisans, including a French master jeweler who worked for me, the understanding how to make it. And again, that knowledge thread of passing down and knowing that it might take you 25, 30 years to really understand your craft. And so it's the challenge. It's, the May gown that's currently up on our website. And hopefully Dita Von Teese has it. And one of these days she's going to do a shoot with it, because it really is kind of our masterwork, because we have a heart-shaped panel in the back. And what doesn't show in that is that it is French seamed. So there's no raw edges on the inside of that garment.
Can you explain the French seam? Because I don't think many of our listeners actually know exactly what that means and why it's so important.
So a French seam is sewn twice. It's a bit like, so I'm sitting here looking at my pants. Jeans that we're all familiar with are usually a flat felled seam. So you want to enclose the raw edge of the fabric within the seam, and it gives it stability and strength, but it also keeps it from fraying. But so with a French seam, you take the external side, the fashioned fabric face to face, and is normally how you sew a seam. And you sew it, and then you open it out, and the raw edges are on the inside, and the fashion fabric is on the outside. Well, you reverse it the first time in a French seam. So you put the backs of the fabric together, and you stitch. Then you turn it, press it, and clip the extra bit down, and then you resew it so that that raw edge is completely encased. It's like we need to have notes with a little picture of a French seam.
Yeah, but it's a whole nother step. It's like doing
It's a whole, it's a three-piece, it's a three-step process.
Okay.
It's stitch, trim, stitch, trim, press, and stitch and press.
All right. And I'm guessing my mother was a seamstress, and the pressing I always thought was a step you could skip. And it certainly was never a step you could skip for the pressing
Lord,
is.
no. No, press it. You can destroy a garment.
I just sort of thought pressing was like, whatever. Yeah, you can do.
Yeah, no, pressing is one of the hardest things to learn.
Yeah. It's sort of a not negotiable either when somebody says go press it. It's like, that really means go do that because it makes a difference in the end. Okay. So you're adding a lot of labor to get that.
Yes.
Get that seam. And why in lingerie is that so important?
In things that we wear next to our body. I mean, to me, it's just there's such intimacy in our relationship with what we wear under or what we wear at home and what we wear to bed. I want to have the most intimate relationship with my clothing because it's next to my body. It's what I dream in. A French seam stabilizes a fragile fabric. It gives it a little more strength. It also wears better over time because raw edges of fabric will fray, especially in fine silks. So it is a pragmatic thing, but it's also a precious thing because it takes a bloody lot of work. I see a lot of garments mass produced. When you see a bias cut silk slip, one side will flow beautifully, one side will ripple. And that is because it was not properly sewn or properly hung. The other thing that makes bias cutting so difficult is when you cut it, you then have to hang it for several days so that the weight of the fabric itself, the warp and weft on the diagonal, it stretches the fabric. Okay, yeah. So it lengthens it. If you stitch it too quickly, it hasn't had time to relax into its final shape. And so you get this wonky thing. One side of the garment is always easier to stitch than the other side. And it's the difference between the warp dominant and the weft dominant. And if you don't pull the fabric just right when you're stitching it, and especially on a French seam, you get this wiggly bit. And I see things all over social media from some very proper brands, and it just makes me crazy. It's like,
yeah, because it could have been done differently.
It could have been done differently. Yeah. I call it my paywall. My prices are high for my brand, and I'm unapologetic about it. I will not say, oh, sorry. No, my pieces are worth every cent you pay for them because of the level of detail and skill that go into them.
If you're enjoying this episode of Paris Undressed, you may also be interested in Storytime in Paris, hosted by Jennifer Garrity, who interviews contemporary authors with a French connection. Every episode includes a reading, so sit back in your armchair and tune into this page-turner podcast. Paris Undressed will be right back after a word from our sponsors. And now, back to Paris Undressed. Well, there's an argument too that I've started to hear with the sustainability, and as a consumer myself, it's just that buy less of everything.
Yeah.
And it sort of has suddenly elevated just how accessible luxury can be. Not just it's not accessible to everybody, but how just even a bit more than what you thought your budget might be is actually accessible because you are suddenly now buying less and because it lasts longer. So it feels like it's still very much mass everything in our consumer. We have certainly not solved the consumer addiction, but It feels like there's a language coming back into the value of a piece and the respect of that.
Yes, I love that you use the word respect because it is going back to great Aunt Ruby. She and her husband dressed for each other. They never had children, but no matter what was going on, they dressed for each other in the evening. And and it was a mark of respect. It wasn't about showing off, and it was, I value this relationship and I value how I present myself in this relationship. And even though we've been married for 45 years, I'm going to continue to value. This is how I demonstrate how much I value you. And I think that is missing. I think I think putting a little effort in. And one of the things that I always love about Paris and France in general is it's not so flippant. You put on a coat and you put on a scarf and you go out because there is a difference between, you know, indoors and outdoors, and that you have to peel layers back to get to know a French person. It isn't an automatic, oh, I love you. No, no, no. And I so value that.
No, there's a respect for the aesthetic on the street for sure. I mean, you don't just walk down to get your baguette without thinking about what you're walking out of and in to make sure, because you're going out.
Yes, yes. And I think that there is, again, I think about like the life erotic. You don't want it all out there. You want there to be some mystery. You want to have to work at it a bit. And beautiful layers. I mean, think about all the unboxing videos that you see. And it's like, oh, they untie the ribbon.
Yes.
They lift off the top of the box. Oh, look at the tissue and how perfectly folded it is. And then, oh,
Because what's in play, it's our imagination.
Yes.
Just teasing itself to wonder what, and the wonder, it captures the wonder. You only use French lace for your collection. Why? Why is that a non-negotiable for you?
Because it's. I was sitting here looking over at my rack, and I'm just like, how the aesthetic, the quality, the way it feels. Again, to me, a beautiful garment isn't really beautiful if you put it on and it's scratchy and nasty and doesn't fit. There is no point to it. A lot of big houses these days, they're using all these synthetic fibers. I can't do it. Good for them. They're making a lot of money. Bless them. My P&L, my accountant would love that. And no,
okay.
I'm a purist.
Yeah.
I want lace that feels good. I want it. I want to keep those beautiful machines in Calais and Calgary working because they're magnificent. They're the most magnificent machines ever in history. The technology and everything that goes into it and the thousands of hands.
Did you know about the manufacturing of lace before you started designing lingerie, or was it something that came as you went through this adventure?
No, I knew it from childhood. My mother taught sewing at one point, and some of her friends did lace making. And I used to look at those pillows and all of those little things. And so, I sort of, went down the lace path. And
you're talking about bobbin lace?
Bobbin lace,
Yep.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And all the different lace techniques. And so I've been collecting lace my whole life from probably about the age of 10, 12 years old. And I have, silk laces and all these, just sometimes I just open up my boxes and say hi to the pets,
and play, yeah,
and play, yeah.
And you have a background in jewelry, and you had a jewelry store. How does jewelry influence your lingerie design?
It's I think of them as the same thing. It's this beautiful expression of strength and fragility. It's that tension. It's that design, it's that problem solving. How do I make something that is ethereal? And how do I maximize the expression of the material and do it in a way that is functional? And in that way, those two things intersect. They are this magical alchemy of material and craft and artistry and functionality. You have to be able to wear a beautiful piece of jewelry. What's the point of the tiara if you can't wear it, right? A beautiful peignoir is nothing if it's not comfortable.
It absolutely needs to be. And there's some play in shadow and light with jewelry as
Yes.
well, that of course is so important in lingerie, and you get
It's
with the
nuance.
bias. Yeah, it's the nuance.
Yeah.
The trousseau, you can actually even order on your website. You can have a trousseau made for you. And how have the pieces changed from Aunt Ruby to today? What are young women or women asking for in a trousseau?
Trousseaus today, I mean, I think they're just starting to sort of percolate back up. I'm very pleased that we're getting a little more attention and a little more activity there, because it is such a wonderful thing. I mean, if you're going to spend $10,000-$20,000 on a wedding gown, and yet you're going to go to some polyester thing for $9.99 that says the bride on the back. Okay, you're going to spend $20,000 on a gown. Great, beautiful, fabulous. Spend $5,000-$10,000 on some pieces that you'll have for the rest of your life that you can then turn around and wear whenever you want to relive the honeymoon. Lovely little robes, dressing robes. I did a wedding actually several years ago where I did a dressing gown for the bride. We did a beautiful gown that she ended up, because her dress was very fragile, going to the venue in the dressing gown, and then some pieces for her to wear, the night, the next day, and the next day, and that it was really fun, and it was fun for her. She had all these special pieces. It sort of kept the reveal going. After I worked for Victor way long ago, I worked for a wedding couturier, and I promised myself I would never make wedding gowns again. But for that client, I actually did her wedding gown because it was lingerie inspired.
She had the entire feel
experience,
from the wedding,
yes,
inside and out. Tell us about your collection, Siren Song. There's a particular aspect to this.
Oh, I loved that collection. That was super, super important. And of course, it happened during COVID. So, right at the dawn of COVID, my husband and I, my husband's work had always taken him to Texas, and we ended up buying a house on the beach in Corpus Christi, Texas, which is, they call it the third coast. It is absolutely stunning. It's the Gulf of Mexico, absolutely stunning water. These dunes, and it just, there was just something so kind of rugged and wild about it. And it sort of took me down the path of mariners' stories, the sirens and mermaids. And, I've been working with my atelier, remotely almost the whole time. I've had the company, and I'm sitting here looking at the pieces, and I just found these gorgeous colors and this amazing lace that is this sort of chocolatey umber with gold in it. And we also decided to make it a bit of a technical challenge of bias on bias on bias. And so we have these one-shouldered pieces that wrap around the body in this bias swirl. And because getting fabric and getting lace was a little tricky, we decided to really just use everything we had to the nth degree. So we ended up taking all of the clippings and throwing them on the table and laying them out so that each individual piece is so unique, because we'll never have quite that same combination. And so we piece it together. It is a jigsaw puzzle. Everything gets pinned and basted and stitched, and it's a labor of love.
Are there any pieces left of the Sirens collection?
There are a few pieces. There's a couple pieces. One of them that I really wish someone would buy, because it needs to be worn on New Year's Eve, is that beautiful one-shouldered gown. I have it. It's an extra small. It's in the teal with this gorgeous lace, but it's an extra small. but it's on our website, and there's a sales room, and you can send me a DM or an email and I'll send you the password to get in. But please, please, please buy the bloody thing, because it really, really needs to be worn New Year's Eve with plenty of champagne.
Well, the colors, and our listeners will have a chance to look at the website, but the colors that you choose for your silks are just sublime, between the blues and the greens and, well, all the colors. They're saturated.
Yes. I love color, and I love color on the body, and I choose colors specifically to enhance the wearer. I think that's one of the things that I will say in my design inspiration and my design thought process. It's not about forcing the body into a shape. It's about glorifying your shape. That's one of the reasons that we use bias. It drapes on the body. Design should always be body driven. I love the body positive movement. I love the embracing your curves movement. Not every brand is going to be able to speak to everybody. You do have to specialize, because there are engineering issues. We just did a piece for Lolly Wish, that beautiful chantress. She works a lot at Crazy Horse, and I mean, she's just a magnificent creature. She's a very voluptuous, full-bodied woman. It's engineering, we took the glory of her and looked to elevate it. And that's why I like to do custom work. And I know it's a harder process for most people because they haven't experienced custom made clothing, but I love to do, well, these days, I used to in the old days meet with someone, but now we do it through Zoom. I love to get to know you. I love to talk to you. I love to look at you, because I want to glorify you. I want to create a garment that you put on that feels like your skin, that elevates your mood. And that's why we spend all this time and effort. It's not to make a statement. It's to enliven you and to elevate you as a client.
But that's how culturally lingerie was made to begin with. It was a very private, intimate, one-on-one, made for your body, and then it turned into a business. It came a business model as it arrived in North America, but you're going back to the origins of how lingerie was made, and that intimate moment that happens between women in a quiet place, as opposed to a store with blaring lights and music and all sorts of other things for sale than the lingerie and a choice selection. It was about draping the body and fitting the fabric to you, not about, as you say, putting whatever you have into whatever's available.
I thought Balenciaga said it best when he was such a master craftsman, and he saw his job not as making design statements, but to make his clients more beautiful. And it was about taking who they were and doing what needed to be done to get the garment to look amazing on them. Now we diet and get all sorts of plastic surgery so that we can fit into the clothes.
If you're enjoying this episode of Paris Undressed, you may also be interested in the Terroir podcast, hosted by culinary journalist Emily Monaco and chef and wine expert Caroline Connor, who take you through the ins and outs of France's extraordinary regional richness. Tune into this exciting new podcast. Paris Undressed will be right back after our word from our sponsors. And now, back to Paris Undressed. Part of your collection that I like is that you offer a lot of capes and hoodies and kimonos and boleros, things that you can actually just drape over what you already have. And this idea that lingerie can be just that, as a little bit something else. There's a function, but there isn't. There's that, for me, those draping movements is just an invitation to float in something.
Yes. It's in fact, I have on my Contessa bed jacket because it was inspired by a 1930s opera cape out of my crazy collection of vintage clothing. And it's because I like to work in bed, I'll be honest. For years and years and years, I like to get up, get my coffee, put on my bed jacket, get back into bed, and do my emails and blah, 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 blah. And I'm always cold and I could put on a sweatshirt, but why? When I have this beautiful silk velvet puffy thing that just keeps me warm. And I wear it out. I put it with jeans and a t-shirt and go out for the evening, or put it over an evening dress, or I've had brides buy them and wear them over their gowns in the evenings. Sounds funny saying this, but I like to be pragmatic. And they're pragmatic pieces. A lot of our robes, a lot of women wear them out, period. They wear our pieces as evening wear. Our pajamas rarely hit the sheets. They usually go out to dinner or entertaining at home. Actually, I wear a lot of our pieces because I love to entertain at home. I love to cook and to put on a comfy pair of silk pajama pants and a little cashmere sweater. It's...
Well, the jackets are certainly Zoom style. You're ahead of your time, right? You were. It's an imperial blue. It's absolutely gorgeous, and the color of the shadows with the light is stunning. So yes, you're styled for any video conference. Kaaren, what has making lingerie taught you about your own femininity and sensuality?
Oh wow, it's reinforcing. It reinforces the fearlessness and it's nurturing. It's so nurturing. It's so validating. The first little collection I did, there was a lovely shop in Northwest Portland, and talking to the owner, and she was like, come in, and it's called Oh Baby. I think it's still there. Go shop with them. She's lovely, and doing a little trunk show there to just sort of test things. This young woman had on our Amelie slip, our little chemise, and she was in tears. She was just like, I've never worn anything that felt like this. It's like, yes, I want you to feel like that. You should never compromise this feeling. You should feel like this. And if you don't feel like this, you shouldn't be wearing it. Put a jar on the counter, and instead of going to Starbucks and buying a silly coffee, put the money in there and buy something that makes you feel like that. And whether it's my company or any other really good crafts company, whether it's a piece of jewelry, buy the best you can. In the end, you will be better served.
Perfect introduction to this question about self-love. Self-love is a word we hear a lot about these days. And what comes to mind when you think of self-love and lingerie?
Lingerie is a marvelous tool for reminding yourself to love yourself. It is, to me, it's self-respect. Self-love, self-respect to me are interchangeable. And how you demonstrate that to yourself lingerie to me is talismanic. This is my talisman. I put this on not for the male gaze or for my partner's gaze, but for mine. A marvelous friend of mine, she's a scream. She just encapsulated it. She would look at what I was doing, and she's sort of a rough and tumble girl, and she would describe herself, in different in cruder terms, but she's not a frilly, lacy girl. She's more of a lace and chains girl. But she would go, I never really understood the appeal of this, but I see women wearing it and how they feel, and I want to look at them, not because of what they're in, but because of the energy they radiate. So beautiful lingerie, respectfully made, properly fit, it elevates you. It's you radiate an energy, you radiate your respect for yourself, and people treat you differently when you radiate that.
And you treat yourself differently.
Yes, you treat yourself differently. So that to me is everything. I mean, that's why I started the company, was to reconnect with my femininity, to give voice to that heart energy. And I always say seduction starts at home, meaning it starts with yourself. If you can't seduce yourself, you can't seduce anyone else. It's an act. It's not a release of energy. It's not a release of feeling or an expression of feeling.
What advice would you give women who feel overwhelmed about shopping for lingerie?
Boy, take a breath, do a little research, educate yourself, let go of the ladies' magazines. It's okay to feel insecure about being naked. We all are. And know that there's so much product out there now. There are so many different ways to go. Turn the voices off in your head. Try a lot of things on. Follow the feeling. If it's uncomfortable, if it makes you twitchy and itchy, don't do it. Doesn't matter who endorses it or how many times you see it on Instagram. There are so many voices like yours that are telling the truth, and opening up, this amazing universe that is there. And hey, there's sales all over. If you can't afford it, save for it. Don't compromise yourself, is what I would say. Follow yourself, follow the feeling.
Lovely. Thank you. So Paris will hopefully be on your horizon soon.
Yes.
What do you love most about Paris?
Oh God, everything.
Everything.
How do we even begin to sing my love song of Paris? On so many levels. I love the tension. I love the public-private dance, the seduction at every turn. I love the respect of work. I think that was one of the most surprising things when I first went to France, was that there is just this appreciation for work, for work done well. And whether it's the man in his blue coat in the bodega who's stacking the cherries just so, or the finest atelier, the workers who respect their own work. I just can't drink enough of it. It energizes me. It enlivens me every single time. You don't know this. Just at the point when I met my husband 5.5 years ago, I was just about to relocate the business to Lyon.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I was in discussion.
Capital of silk. Yeah.
Yeah, is that we had been in about a year-long discussion with your business development, the French business development folks. And because of my love of French lace, they were like, hey, base yourself here and we'll help support that because you love our materials. It's like, yes. Unfortunately, that sort of, I chose him over love of France.
Love will do that to you. That's looking at the smile on your face, it doesn't seem like you didn't make the right choice. So I think it all worked out just the way it should have.
It did.
Well, I'm very much looking forward to when we can actually share a moment together in Paris, and
Absolutely.
Would like to thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to continue our conversation, and I can't wait for the next one.
Visit the sensual, sophisticated, and luxurious world of Layneau at layneau.com. That's LAYNEAU.com. Or on Instagram at Layneau, LAYNEAU, and begin your own sensorial journey of bold self-love. And thank you, merci, for listening to Paris Undressed. Paris Undressed is produced by Paris Underground Radio. For more on this show and shows like it, please go to parisundergroundradio.com.
This episode of Paris Undressed was produced by Jennifer Garrity for Paris Underground Radio. For more on this show and shows like it, please visit parisundergroundradio.com.